In the heart of Ibadan, a sprawling, energetic city that never truly sleeps, a 14-year-old girl with next to nothing was about to share the little she possessed. She noticed a frail, hungry old woman and felt a pull of compassion she couldn't ignore. This girl had no idea that her small act of kindness was about to trigger a chain of events that would change her life forever, leading her directly to a powerful millionaire. What happens when a simple meal, offered with a pure heart, unlocks a future you've only dared to dream of? Stick around and hit subscribe to see how one moment of compassion completely transforms a poor girl's destiny. Ibadan stirs to life long before the sun graces the sky with its first gentle rays of light. The air, thick with the promise of a new day, hums with a constant and vibrant energy. It is a symphony composed of melodic calls of street vendors advertising their wares, the hurried footsteps of countless people rushing towards their daily work, and the rich, mouth-watering smell of fried akra wafting from countless roadside stalls. The entire city seems to breathe as one, a massive, living organism pulsing with purpose and ambition. Amidst this beautiful and overwhelming chaos, a 14-year-old girl named Amina moved quietly and almost invisibly, her worn-out slippers making soft, rhythmic sounds on the dusty, well-trodden road, a solitary note in the city's grand orchestra. Amina's world was a small and humble one, a universe contained within the four walls of a single room she shared with her mother, tucked away discreetly behind a roaring, vibrant marketplace. They owned very little in the way of material possessions, a pair of thin mattresses, a few cooking pots, and clothes that were mended more times than they could count. Yet, the boundless and unconditional love that flowed between them was a treasure that made their small, cramped home feel as vast and magnificent as any palace. Every single morning followed the same unchangeable rhythm. Wake before the dawn chorus, meticulously help her mother prepare the vegetables for their stall, and then carry a heavy basket filled not just with produce, but with all their hopes of the day, to the market. This particular morning, however, carried a different charge in the air, a subtle shift in the fabric of the day that Amina could feel in her bones. As she made her way past the old, colonial-era post office, a building whose faded paint told stories of bygone era, a faint and desperate sound managed to pierce through the city's morning clamor and catch her undivided attention. Huddled beneath a broken, discarded wooden crate was a cat. So impossibly thin its bones seemed to press against its skin, its eyes wide with terror that spoke of days of hardship. People hurried past in a blur of motion, each individual absorbed in the bubble of their own life, entirely oblivious to the tiny creature struggling for survival in the shadows. But Amina, whose heart was often more open than her pockets, saw it. She recalled a lesson her mother had instilled in her since she was a small child, words that had become the compass of her young life. Amina, kindness is never wasted. It is a seed that always grows, sometimes in places you least expect. Without a moment's hesitation, she knelt, her simple, clean clothes brushing against the grime of the pavement, and with a soft grunt of effort, she gently lifted the heavy, splintered box. The cat, sensing her gentle intention, limped out from its prison, weak but finally free, and gave a soft, grateful nudge to her hand. She could feel each one of its ribs beneath the thin fur. Without a second thought, she reached into her pocket, pulled out the small, precious piece of bread intended for her own breakfast, and offered it to the starving animal. A genuine, radiant smile lit up Amina's face, a smile so pure it momentarily chased away the persistent pangs of her own hunger. As she stood up, brushing the dust from her knees to leave, the little cat, having devoured the bread, began to follow her, a tiny, determined shadow at her heels. It was in that moment that she noticed someone else had been watching her small act of charity. An old woman sat on the weathered steps of the post office, appearing tired from a long journey, yet carrying herself with a quiet, unshakable dignity. Her clothes were worn and faded, but immaculately clean, and her eyes, deep and soulful, seemed to hold a universe of both profound wisdom and deep, unspoken sorrow. Following the deep respect for elders ingrained in her culture, Amina greeted her softly and respectfully. "Good morning, Mama." Amina's days were a meticulously woven tapestry of relentless hard work, quiet resilience, and the deep, abiding love she shared with her mother, a love that served as their shield against the world's harshness. Waking in the pre-dawn darkness, Her first chores were always to sweep their single room clean of the day's dust and to help her mother wash the vegetables under the cool morning water. They always made a point to wear their best clothes to the market, no matter how faded the fabric or how many times a seam had been repaired. Respect yourself first, Amina, and others will have no choice but to respect you. Her mother would often insist, adjusting Amina's collar with hands that were rough from labor but gentle in their touch. This small ritual was their armor, a way of maintaining their dignity in a world that often tried to strip it from them. Their stall was a humble affair, just a small wooden table set up under the sprawling, protective branches of a large mango tree, a prime spot her mother had secured through years of early arrivals. They sold a vibrant array of tomatoes, peppers, and onions, the brilliant reds, greens, and whites of their produce standing in stark contrast to the meager income they painstakingly earned. Amina would often find herself watching the wealthy women from the city's richer neighborhoods, adorned in fine, shimmering clothes and heavy gold jewelry, as they haggled aggressively over a few naira, seemingly blind to the deep, tired lines etched onto her mother's face by years of worry and toil. In those moments, a profound and heavy sense of invisibility would wash over Amina, making her feel as small and insignificant as a single grain of dust. But then, a reassuring and familiar hand from her mother would gently rest on her shoulder, a simple touch that had the power to bring her back from the edge of despair. "We are strong, you and I. Amina," her mother would whisper, her voice a quiet anchor in the chaotic sea of the market. "We have each other, and that is more than most people can say." These words, spoken with unwavering conviction, were a lifeline that reminded Amina of their true wealth. The little cat she had rescued soon became her constant, loyal companion, a furry shadow that would curl up and sleep peacefully beneath their table, blissfully unaware of the world's troubles. It was a small but significant change, a new thread of joy woven into the fabric of her life. During the slow, quiet moment of the afternoon when customers were scarce, Amina would stroke the cat's soft fur and whisper her deepest, most secret dreams into its twitching ears. She spoke of her intense yearning to attend school, to wear a crisp uniform and carry a bag full of books, to lose herself completely in the magical worlds of history and literature. But the reality was that school was an unimaginable luxury, a distant star in a sky that was perpetually overcast with the demands of survival. The city was an unforgiving place, and sometimes the older market boys, full of senseless cruelty, would taunt her about her worn clothes and her family's poverty, their sharp words stinging her heart like 1,000 tiny cuts. A few days after her first encounter with the old woman, she appeared at their stall again. This time, she looked completely and utterly exhausted, as if the very act of walking had drained all the life from her. "Water?" she asked, her voice a faint, raspy whisper that was nearly lost in the noise of the market. Amina's mother, without a single moment of hesitation, immediately poured a cup from their own precious supply and offered her a stool to sit on. The old woman's eyes, which seemed to miss nothing, softened as she watched Amina carefully break off a piece of her own meager lunch to share with the little cat. "You are kind," she repeated, her voice a little stronger this time. She didn't buy anything, but she stayed for a long while, a silent, watchful, and calming presence. The very next morning, a heavy, oppressive gray sky hung low over Ibadan, promising a storm. Before long, the promise was fulfilled as rain began to pour down in relentless, blinding sheets, turning the bustling market paths into treacherous, muddy streams and forcing everyone to seek shelter. Amina and her mother huddled together under their leaky stall cover, a thin sheet of rusted metal that offered little protection from the elements, shivering as a cold, damp air seeped into their bones. The usually vibrant market was eerily quiet, the typical symphony of sounds replaced by the drumming of the rain against every surface, a lonely and melancholic rhythm that seemed to wash the color from the world. It was through this thick, gray curtain of downpour that Amina saw her. It was the old woman, struggling valiantly but futilely against the torrent. Her clothes were soaked completely through, clinging to her frail frame, and she looked dangerously fragile, as if a strong gust of wind might carry her away. An immediate and powerful surge of protectiveness, fierce and instinctual, washed over Amina. Without a second thought, she grabbed a large, sturdy banana leaf to use as a makeshift umbrella and ran to the old woman's side, her bare feet sinking into the cold mud. "Mama, come with us," she urged, her voice clear and strong above the sound of the rain, as she gently guided the trembling woman towards the relative safety of their stall. Her mother's face, already etched with the day's worries, creased with new layer of concern. They had so little to share as it was, and another mouth to feed, even for a short while, felt like an impossible burden. But as she looked at the sheer desperation in the old woman's eyes, and then at the unwavering compassion on her own daughter's face, she remained silent, her heart winning the battle against her practical fears. Amina quickly found a dry cloth for the woman to wrap around her shoulders and prepared a cup of hot tea, using the very last spoonful of their precious sugar to sweeten it. The old woman sat quietly, cradling the warm cup in her hands, simply staring out at the relentless rain as if lost in a deep and distant memory. Then, as if a dam had broken within her, she began to speak. She gently asked Amina about her life, her voice soft but her questions pointed and full of genuine interest. Encouraged by her gentle demeanor, Amina found herself pouring out her heart, the words tumbling out in a rush of emotion. She spoke about her father's sudden death years ago, her mother's relentless, back-breaking work, and her own seemingly impossible dream of getting an education. The old woman listened with such profound and focused intensity that Amina felt, perhaps for the first time in her life, truly and completely seen. In return, the woman shared a piece of her own story, of a beloved husband lost too soon, and a long, arduous journey to the city to find her only son. Just as the rain finally began to subside, a group of boisterous, unruly market boys ran past, splashing mud everywhere. One of them, seeing the small cat that had emerged from under the table, carelessly picked up a small stone and threw it. The cat yelped in pain and darted away in fear. Without thinking, Amina scrambled after it, slipping and falling hard in the slick mud. "Leave her alone," a voice suddenly commanded, sharp and ringing with an authority that was utterly shocking. It was the old woman. She was on her feet, her back ramrod straight, her eyes blazing with a fire that stunned the boys into a sudden, fearful silence. They stared wide-eyed for a moment, then scurried away into the crowd. Amina returned, cradling the trembling cat, and the old woman pulled her into a warm, firm hug. "You are brave," she whispered. "Never let anyone make you feel small." A week went by, and life in the market slowly returned to its usual chaotic rhythm. But a new story, a fresh piece of gossip, was buzzing through the stalls like a persistent fly. People gathered in small, excited groups, whispering about a wealthy and powerful CEO, a Mr. Adewale, who was desperately and publicly searching for his lost mother. The story grew with each telling, embellished with details of his immense fortune and the great reward he was offering. Soon, professionally printed posters began appearing on every available surface, on walls, on telephone poles, and on the sides of market stalls, their sheer numbers speaking to the urgency of the search. They all showed the smiling, kindly face of an elderly woman. When Amina saw one of the posters tacked to a tree near their stall, her heart seized violently in her chest, and the basket of peppers she was holding nearly slipped from her grasp. She let out a small, involuntary gasp as a cold wave of recognition washed over her. The world around her seemed to slow down and fall silent, the market's noise fading into a distant hum. It was her. The face on the poster, though healthier and happier, was undeniably that of the old woman from the market, the woman she had shared tea and stories with in the rain. The kind, weary eyes were the same ones that looked at her with such gratitude. She ran to her mother, her feet flying over familiar ground, her hands trembling so much that the poster she had ripped from a tree was shaking. "Mother, look!" she panted, holding it out. Her mother's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at the picture, her gaze shifting from the poster to Amina's face and back again. "It is her," she whispered, her voice full of awe and confusion. They stood there together for a long moment, frozen in a state of shared shock, the poster a fragile piece of paper that held an impossible truth. Who in the world would ever believe them? Two humble, insignificant market sellers. The very idea felt absurd, a foolish daydream. The next day, as if summoned by their thoughts, the old woman appeared at their stall yet again, looking more weary and lost than ever before. Amina watched her approach, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She knew she had to say something, that she couldn't keep this monumental secret to herself. Gathering every last ounce of her courage, she took a deep breath to steady her nerves. "Mama," she began, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts, as she held out the crumpled poster for the old woman to see. A sad, beautiful smile slowly spread across the old woman's face, and tears, not of sorrow but relief, welled in her tired eyes and began to trace paths down her wrinkled cheeks. "Yes," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "That is me. My son is looking for me." She then explained everything. How after her husband died, she had journeyed to the massive, overwhelming city to find her son, but had gotten terribly lost in confusing chaos. With no money and no way to contact him, she was left to wander the streets, invisible to the rushing crowds. "Everyone ignored me. They looked right through me as if I was a ghost," she said, pulling Amina into another tight, emotional hug. "But you saw me. You and your mother. You helped me when I had absolutely nothing. You are my family now." Later that same afternoon, a sleek black car, so polished it reflected the blue sky, pulled up near the market's edge. It was an object of such obvious expense and modernity that it looked like a spaceship that had landed in another century. A hush fell over the usually boisterous market as every head turned to stare, conversations dying mid-sentence. A man in a sharp, impeccably tailored suit stepped out, his expensive shoes landing in the dust. His face was a mask of profound worry and desperate hope. It was Mr. Adewale, the CEO from the posters, in the flesh. His eyes frantically, almost wildly, scanned the sprawling crowd, searching for the one face he longed to see. The seconds stretched into an eternity as his gaze passed over stall after stall, his expression growing more desperate with each passing moment. And then, finally, his eyes landed on the small, humble table under the mango tree and the old woman sitting there, sipping a cup of water Amina had given her. "Mother!" he cried out, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief that echoed to the silent market. He ran to her, stumbling slightly in his haste, and enveloped her in a tight, desperate embrace, burying his face on her shoulder as tears of joy streamed down his face. After several long, emotional moments, he turned to Amina and her mother, his eyes filled with gratitude so profound and overwhelming that it needed no words to be understood. He thanked them over and over again, his voice cracking with emotion, repeating how he had almost given up hope. He then pressed a thick, heavy envelope full of money into Amina's mother's hand. Enough, he explained, to pay their rent for years to come and to start a proper, thriving shop instead of their humble stall. It was a sum of money that represented not just wealth, but freedom from the daily struggle that had defined their lives. But for Amina, he had a different, more precious gift in mind, a reward tailored to dreams she had whispered to her cat. He looked her directly in the eye and promised her a full scholarship to the best and most prestigious school in the city. This was not just a temporary gift. It was an education that would continue all the way through university, a golden key that would unlock a future she had only ever dared to imagine. He explained that his own education had been his path out of poverty, and that he wanted to give her the same chance. He even formally adopted the little cat, promising a life of pampered comfort and endless care. The entire market watched, stunned into a collective, breathless silence, as the poor, invisible girl who sold vegetables was rewarded beyond anyone's wildest imagination, all for a simple, unthinking act of kindness. They witnessed a real-life fairy tale unfold before their very eyes, a powerful demonstration that a good heart held more value than all the goods in the market combined. The scene was a vivid, unforgettable tableau. The reunited mother and son, the stunned but grateful market woman, and the young girl whose future had just been rewritten, all because she chose to see someone in need. Today, when Amina walks through the streets of Ibadan, she no longer feels invisible. She wears a crisp school uniform, her bag filled with books and the promise of a future she once only dreamed of. Her mother now runs a thriving shop in the market, and the tired lines on her face have been replaced by a smile of peace and pride. The old woman, now living comfortably with her son, visits him often, a beloved grandmother figure and a warm reminder of the incredible journey they shared. Amina's story became a legend in the market, A tale told to remind people that blessings often arrive in the most unexpected ways. It's a powerful illustration that what goes around truly does come around. The world is full of people in need, their stories hidden behind tired eyes and worn-out clothes. They are all around us, waiting to be seen. So, the next time you see someone who needs help, someone everyone else is walking past, what will you do? Will you stop? Will you offer a hand, a kind word, or a small piece of what you have? Or will you hurry by, forever unaware of the life you could have changed, or the profound blessing you might have missed?